Hi, good evening, folks. My name is Mason Philpott. I'm the Director of Recruitment with American Canadian School of Medicine. Thank you for joining in with us. We'll provide a few more or some additional time for some additional folks to log in to the webinar we have tonight. But while we're waiting on that, we'll just play you a short video.
Welcome all to this very special occasion, the second white coat ceremony for the American Canadian School of Medicine. This ceremony marks an important milestone for our new students on their journey to becoming a physician.
Your white coat will symbolize responsibility, integrity, and the trust society places in your hands. Our faculty stands by your side, guiding and inspiring you to become exceptional leaders.
To me, this is what we can learn best from the people of Dominica. Enjoy and embrace life. Make time to be in the community and learn to care for yourselves and each other.
As a member of the medical profession, I solemnly pledge to dedicate my life to the service of humanity.
Our commitment is not only to impart knowledge upon you, but also to nurture you through your journey towards becoming a compassionate doctor who will make a difference in the world. Medicine is a lifelong commitment to learning and service. And the staff of American Canadian School of Medicine pledges to you to stand by you every step of this journey.
All right. So thank you everyone that has tuned in. We have a really special webinar. This is just a really special time of year. We are getting ready to have our now 5th white coat ceremony. So we're super excited about all the new students who will be arriving here in Dominica in a matter of weeks. So we're excited about that. Before anyone can get to the white coat ceremony, obviously they need to apply. So tonight's webinar is going to be strictly about building a competitive medical school application. While we're still waiting on a few others to log in, those of you who are already in the comment section, if you could just put the location that you're logging in from. I know we have people from all over the US and Canada that have been interested in our school. I know, myself as the Director of Recruitment, I've been in contact with some of y'all already, and I have joining with me Dr. Jon Bolaski, who is our senior admissions consultant. He's also on the admissions committee itself. He comes with decades of experience in working with medical students. So I think this is going to be really informative. You'll be able to walk away with this with some, I would say a higher level of confidence as you go through the application process of applying to medical school, which can be absolutely grueling. So it does look like we have some folks tuning in from Houston, Texas, my hometown. I'm actually in Dominica right now, but love to see that we have people from Texas dialing in. We have quite a few students from Texas already. And I do see we also have Fatima from Toronto, Ontario. So we have quite a few students that are from Canada as well. We do, part of our mission statement is to provide highly trained and well-qualified physicians, not only for the US, but for Canada as well. So thank you guys for tuning in. I see we also have Fawaz from Waterloo, Canada. So thank you very much for tuning in. And we have Karen from Las Vegas and Cassandra from Virginia. So thank you guys for logging in. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce my guests. First time speaking, Dr. Jon Bolaski for one of our webinars. Jon, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and also why prospective medical students should listen to what you have to say about applying to medical school.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and a good evening to everyone who's attending at this time. You made a comment earlier about my decades of experience. That's interesting. I'm probably the oldest faculty member here on campus, and for those of you, I am in Dominica as well. But I thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. Began my career inpatient mental health, behavioral health, psychiatry, where I covered the ER for about 10 years, and then moved on to working in a university for individuals with who are neurodiverse, and then moved on to medical education, where I've been for the past 20 years. Just full disclosure, while I am a doctor, I am not a medical doctor. I think that that's important to share. However, on the admissions committee, we have MDs, PhDs as well. But that's a little bit about me. I'm here just to share some of my thoughts about how to successfully complete a medical school application. And I hope that you'll find some of these thoughts valuable as you consider your application to medical schools. And we are not in competition with other medical schools. We want to make sure that you have the skills and the ability, and you're presenting yourself in the best possible light.
I appreciate it, Dr. Bolaski. And just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to go through a number of topics related to applying to medical school. So I know some of you out there, you probably have some of your questions. We are going to have a section at the end for questions. So what I would recommend is just sit through the webinar that we have. And then if we have not addressed some of your questions that you might have, then we'll address that towards the end of the webinar. I know it's really, obviously we're excited about our new students who are coming in, but also we have a whole group of students who are just now starting to put their applications together and getting ready to apply for medical school. So it is a nerve-wracking process, and I appreciate you being here, Dr. Jon Bolaski, to really, give some insight and guidance for young people who this might be their first cycle that they're applying for medical school. And, hopefully by seeing through this, they can get a clear idea of really what the next steps are and what they should be doing as they get prepared. So we do want to go over kind of exactly what the admissions committee is looking for, go over academic metrics. We'll discuss the personal statement, which is a big one a lot of students get hung up on, letters of recommendation, extracurricular and clinical experiences, along with common mistakes that can happen, and then kind of the next steps, what to do if someone is interested in applying, which obviously you need to apply before you're able to enroll. So I do want to give some overview of the school. We are located here in Dominica. It is a really one-of-a-kind medical school. We are the first private nonprofit medical school that's in the Caribbean. We are extremely student-centric. Our class sizes, you're looking at 10 students for every teaching faculty member. There is clinical integration. You're doing case-based curriculum. We have other webinars that really go into depth about it. We are fully accredited. We're accredited by IAR and ACCM. So that is extremely important for anyone who's looking at going to medical school outside of the US or Canada, because our entire program is really structured with the idea that students are going to go back and practice either in the US or Canada. We've really do an effective job of trying to minimize the costs that our students have while providing a high quality level of education. There's also a number of scholarships that we've been able to bring to our students. And really we want to make sure they're effectively prepared, not only for residency, but to be able to practice. And most importantly, and what I'm really jazzed up about, Dominica is a really beautiful place to be as people are going through their first 2 years of basic sciences. They have been home to medical students for over 30 years. So it's a very welcoming environment, from our students who have initially started with us, who are now, completing their step one and going on to clinicals. They really have fond things to say about being here in Dominica. I think it provides an outstanding environment for students to come in and get a really high quality level of education. So, Jon, let's go ahead and kind of start off with you. Typically, the way that our admissions process works is someone works with myself or one of our admissions advisors. They then go through the application process, but I have no say in whether someone gets accepted or not, right? It goes into the admissions committee. So I think in trying to help out people, what is it you'd say, that the admissions committee is looking for to find someone who we think will do well in medical school?
Mason, that's a very, very important question, and one that frequently gets asked by individuals applying. I think what's important is, completing that medical school application. Students need to really think about the prerequisites when they're in their early years of school, and to be able to address those and to do as best as they can in them. We also, committees will look at the MCAT and standardized exams. I know individuals in Canada may be taking the Casper test as well as the MCAT. And the committee also looks at letters of recommendation. Our committee looks at both an academic letter and a professional clinical letter, which is very important in terms of gathering some information about the applicant. And I think what's important is when individuals ask for a letter of recommendation from either their advisor and others, you need to ask for a good letter of recommendation. So what's important is, when you're approaching others, can you write me a good letter of recommendation? And those are things to really, really consider. And, you go through the whole process. This gets presented to the committee. The committee reviews, they sit down, they discuss, and they have an opportunity to review how the person presented, their background, their personal statement. All of the information is sort of put together, and we call that a holistic approach.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can go a little bit more in depth on, kind of what that means when we're doing a holistic review. Obviously, we do have students who have come into our program and they've been successful. Maybe they didn't get the MCAT score they were expecting to get. And so someone that is in that type of situation, what are some of the, other characteristics that people applying to medical school can have that you think really helps to round out them as an applicant?
That's a really important balancing act type of question. The MCAT is not the be all and end all. And a score that is lower than one had hoped for doesn't mean the end of the world. What it means is, let's look at other areas. And that's what the holistic approach is. You'll look at, what community involvement, what leadership activities took place, what organizations did the individual participate in. That gets to be part of the discussion. I like to look at students too that travel in different areas of their community, be able to work with the underserved. There are some applicants that are fortunate enough to do some programming in other countries. It gives them another aspect to bring into the admissions discussion. All of these things get incorporated into the process. I think it's very important to pay attention to your personal statement as well. That can be a deal breaker at times. And we're getting better at identifying if some of the applications have been done by ChatGPT. And don't think that medical schools don't run it through programs to see what the percentage of the comments, the written statements are from these types of programs. Again, that isn't a deal breaker, but it really is important to pay attention and to be very clear. Resumes are important too, and to delineate your experiences. Why are resumes important? Because it's a step-by-step process, and you can see breaks in either education or employment, and applicants need to be very much aware to know how to answer those questions. So you help them along. So hopefully either your advisors in your pre-med programs are speaking to you, or your mentors, that they're really helping you design the whole process.
Yeah, I think that's, great to lay that out. I think we do get students that, maybe they've done a lot to prepare for medical school, and, there might be something small that has happened, but we are looking at everything. So, it really does come down to effort, and do keep in mind, this is a very competitive academic program to go into, right? So you're competing against others. So, attention to detail becomes very important. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the academic component. I'd like to dive a little bit deeper. I know we've kind of scratched the surface on that.
Could I talk a little bit about the grade point average and prerequisites, or should we?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about that. Obviously, what's an ideal GPA range for someone who is looking at going to medical school?
Again, a tough question to answer. Sometimes individuals start their undergraduate career and they're still trying to figure out who they are, to adjust to living independently and expectations with friends, with academics. So I think our committee really looks at an upward trend in academics. We're a little bit more forgiving of individuals that may have struggled earlier on, as long as they keep that trend going. And you want to look at it. Committees look at the competitive nature of the undergraduate programs, and there are a number of manuals that address this. U.S. News and World Report is one that has a ranking system, and there are many others that are available. And institutions look at that. Some institutions look at, did you get all your prerequisites at the school that you're graduating from, or did you take some of those prerequisites at other programs? I've seen some applicants who have really struggled with some of the science courses, and then they moved to take it at another institution, and they may have done very well there, and then they transfer those grades in. But sometimes that can create a question mark with some admissions committees. Why wasn't that taken at the institution that's granting the degree? I mean, there's a lot of flexibility, but why I'm saying this is be prepared to answer some of these questions during your interview.
Yeah, I know we definitely do look at trends. Because sometimes I get calls from students. They'll say, "Hey, my grade point average is, whatever. Do I have a shot at getting into medical school?" And so, obviously, someone who, let's say, for example, has a 3.5 GPA, and maybe they started out, their first 2 years it was a 3.0, and then their last 2 years it was a 4.0. That's obviously much stronger than someone who started out with a 4.0, and then all of a sudden, as they got to upper level classes, their grades really dropped down. So that is taken into consideration.
Right. I think what's important too is when you're thinking about the GPA, you want to do as well as you can in your coursework, and some of that may offset some of the MCAT performance. But then some committees may look at the biological component of the MCAT, and some committees put a little bit more emphasis on the CARS. So there are different areas that you want to look at. I'm a real supporter of individuals with group study. Oh, my lights just went off. Excuse me. There. I apologize for that. That's what happens when you be my age and you don't move around much. But you try to work all of these things, and it's not any one thing. We've had students that have had academic issues that have really recovered from those academic issues, whether it's academic probation, but they move forward and they, in their interview, they said, yeah, they took ownership of that. That's very important in committees, taking ownership for one's challenges and saying, this is what I did to make myself look more competitive.
And we've seen that, quite often there might be someone, and especially with COVID, which was a huge distraction for students. They might have had a semester or two where it really didn't reflect their actual ability. Some of it's a maturity factor, right? Like some people, as they get older, they, kind of get it together and they're no longer the same student they were when they were 19 years old. And we do take that into consideration. Let me ask you this, Dr. Bolaski. Let's say, if you were talking to someone who perhaps, didn't get off to a good start academically, something happened to them, they have a spark, they really do want to become a physician, but, they don't have a strong academic background. What would be some of the recommendations you might have for someone that finds themselves in that particular scenario?
Yeah, we find individuals coming to applications, to medical schools, feeling in that same way, and then they don't fill out an application and say, there's no opportunity for me. But the other side of it is you have to do that introspection and say, okay, what are my skills? What are my abilities? What can I really display to the committee and to others? And what can I do academically? Well, academically, you can reach out to your advisor in school. You should, find out what resources are available there. Office hours is one approach. Group study is another approach. There are different offices at different universities that provide specific support services. And I would definitely take advantage of that. Why is that important? Because the committee is going to ask, well, it seems like you had a rocky time here. Did you utilize any services? And if you did, how did you access them? Who helped you with the initiative to approach that? Again, those are areas that it's not a weakness of reaching out. It's a strength that shows that you're self-aware.
Great. I want to also touch on the MCAT. This is obviously a big hurdle for many folks. I've seen, unfortunately, it can almost be a dream crusher for many people. Where we see students who've seemed to do a lot that was really impressive, academic wise. Maybe they were great students, in quite a bit of activities, great shadowing experience and clinical experience. And then they just take the MCAT and don't get the score that they were expecting. What would you advise someone who might be in that situation, who, has kind of thought about being a physician their whole life, and they take the MCAT and it just kind of hits them, like a, brick over the head. And, how would you advise a young person who seems to have had this dream, they've, kind of done all the right things, and then they take the MCAT, they don't get the score they were expecting?
Yeah, that can be very disillusioning, especially if one has been thinking about medicine. I read an application today, somebody who was 7 years old and wanted to become a physician and wants to become a physician. So what's important in looking at that is, if you take the MCAT, you don't score in the range that you're hopeful for, you really have to do a thorough review of what took place. Well, you can't get the specific answers back because the questions are proprietary. But what you can get is a sense of, understanding about how the MCAT is developed, how it's used. So you reach out, to different programs. I'm a real fan of Kaplan, of other programs, of Princeton Review. There are a lot of programs that are developed by specific colleges and universities that are helpful. What you don't want to do is to repeat yourself for successive MCATs. So you might think, well, how many times can a person take an MCAT? Well, you can take it as many times as you want. It gets pretty expensive. I've had applicants take the MCAT 4 or 5 times with little variation. Well, that tells the admissions committee something, that the individual did not take additional approaches and they followed the same path. So you take a break, you do that self-assessment. You don't want to take, some individuals want to take the MCAT, they get a score that they're disillusioned with, they want to take the MCAT in the next month. What's going to change in 4 weeks? Well, maybe you can cram in 4 weeks, but that's not the intent. You have to understand as well.
One of the things I've seen in working with prospective medical students is sometimes people can rush when they take the MCAT. For example, taking the MCAT before they've taken physics or organic chemistry is a huge mistake because this is content that's going to be on there. I mean, the MCAT in and of itself, you really need to put in the proper time to prepare for it. But also, you do need to make sure you've been exposed to those courses.
That's an excellent point, Mason. You really should take the MCAT following completion of the prerequisites. It really gives you a sense of, it should help you along the way, but some individuals definitely feel rushed. Oh, I need to, stay up with my class. My roommate and others are taking the exam. Go by your own clock. I have hundreds of stories that I could tell this group about individuals. I met with one last week who took the MCAT, quote, blind, went into it without preparation, and then was applying to school. So, the performance wasn't that strong. And this is somebody who had a 3.7 GPA and thought that would allow them to be successful. It's not always about the GPA and the knowledge. It's about understanding the exam, what it's looking for, and really understanding the science courses that you've been taking.
Great. I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is about personal statement tips. This is obviously a huge component, right? And I do get medical or applicants who just really get caught up on the personal statement. So it is, again, reflective storytelling. I think, as you pointed out, Jon, we live in this area or time, I should say, where there's artificial intelligence. Anyone can, create a personal statement with ChatGPT in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
For the most part, we can tell, if something, has been really cooked up with ChatGPT. And why don't you kind of dive into some tips as far as what someone should put together in their personal statement?
Applicants should read the requirements of each medical school that they apply to regarding the personal statement and adhere to those guidelines and understand what the school is looking for. Medical schools, the majority of them, have a word limit on personal statements. We do. Ours is 750 words. Some schools have 500 words. You need to be concise, to the point, clear. Some individuals like to tell stories. Stories have their place, but also you need to share about your strengths, who you are, why medicine is so important. the personal stories about family members, illnesses, it that while that may be important, I think it's also important to respect privacy and to have boundaries within that. So individual committees are looking for how this person constructs a statement in terms of why medicine is relevant and important and what they're working towards and what they've done to achieve those ends. There's nothing wrong with sharing personal stories. Please don't get me wrong, but it has to be relevant into the context of what you're trying to present.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things I advise students on is, make sure this is your actual story, right? And to really, kind of lay out what is your motivation for wanting to be a physician, and kind of, how have your experiences, contributed to your overall goal of becoming a physician. Um, this is really important. That being said, I think if someone has, you know, let's say completed a bachelor's degree, or at least completed 3 years out of a bachelor's degree, you should be able to put together a personal statement within maximum a few weeks. I actually have run into a few people. They get a lot of anxiety about this topic, especially some of our students. They tend to be more science based, and that's really what they excel at. And so I also want to advise people not to get caught up too much on spending months and months putting together a personal statement.
And another side to that is, say you spend a few days or a week writing up a statement, let it simmer, go away, do some other things, and then come back to it a few days later or a week later. And is this what I want to say? This is what will individuals think of me reading this piece of paper, this document?
Absolutely. All right, we're going to move on to the letters of recommendations. So we currently require 2 letters of recommendation. One, from someone that knows you on an academic basis, and one from someone that knows you on a professional basis. I think, John, if you can go over, kind of some tips for creating a strong letter, and also making sure that people have these lined up so that they are able to get their letters of recommendation in a timely fashion.
I would work the process through early on in your career, with either science or other faculty members that know your work and can really contribute, specifically what your strengths are and how you would make a good physician. So that means, using the office hours, meeting with faculty members, getting to know them, and them allowing them to get to know you. So, in writing a letter of recommendation, committees are going to look at fine details. So that is, letters should be recent and they should be dated. They should not be 2 or 3 years old. Letters also need to be on the letterhead. That's very important. Schools will look at that. And while you may have your own letters that have been written and you have them on file, schools will typically only accept letters of recommendation specifically from the letter writer, and it needs to be uploaded into the system. So while the letters that you may have may be very thoughtful, well written, there is that sense that it does need to come directly from the letter writer. So you work on a strong letter really means, okay, the details. Do you arrive in class on time? Are you well prepared? Do you get involved in discussions? Are you a team player? Do you support your other students when they're challenged? All of these things become part and parcel of the letter of recommendation. And, so you start working on it as soon as possible. And because faculty are slow, we have a lot of other responsibilities. And if you ask them at the end of a semester for a letter of recommendation, good luck. It's just not going to happen. The more that you pester them, uh, while they may be helpful, they can dig in their heels and they can say, you're going to have to wait till after semester break when I come back on campus.
No, that's great, and yeah, I think it's part of the preparation and in not waiting until the last minute to try and get a letter of recommendation for somebody. Obviously, as their students go through their undergrad, they're going to have certain professors who they make really strong connections with, and so I think you do want to make that kind of part of the process. Um, as far as getting a professional letter of recommendation, let's say if someone is working as a medical scribe, or let's say they're working in a clinical setting. Do you think it's beneficial if they get a letter of recommendation from someone who's already a physician?
Boy, I was going to talk about this, but yes, you're applying to medical school. Don't you think you should have a letter of recommendation from a physician? I think it's very important. And I encourage individuals to shadow, to meet with physicians, to volunteer in the hospitals, to get to know physicians. It's vitally important. Doesn't mean that the committee will not look favorably if you don't have a letter from a physician. Say you have it from a nurse practitioner, but it needs to be a higher level professional who probably has a terminal degree. Uh, that gives a little bit more credibility. But if you're applying to medical school, it's important to really have exposure to physicians and have them share her or his thoughts.
Yeah, I think as someone's going through the process of getting ready for medical school, the fact that if you have someone who's a physician that already believes in you, that's huge. And then number two, it kind of shows that you already have this network that you've started to build up. So if I were, obviously I'm not a physician, I didn't go through medical school, but if I was in someone's shoes, I think, that's definitely something that you should be looking at. And really details do start to matter. So is it the end all be all, if someone has it or doesn't have it, not necessarily, but I think, it does really help to strengthen up an application, especially as we mentioned previously, it is a holistic review. We're really looking at everything as they go through the admissions process.
So committees will look at, say you don't have a strong MCAT, or there may be some challenges academically, but then they'll look at your clinical experiences and your letters of recommendation and your volunteering as well as leadership experiences. So that's, again, what we're talking about, the holistic approach.
So yeah, I also want to get in, because it is a holistic approach. We're going to get into extracurriculars and clinical experience, right? Because we're not just looking for people who, happen to do really well GPA wise and take an MCAT. There's other activities that you need to be doing as someone who's pre-med. So we really, are looking at people, who are shadowing, people who are in a clinical setting, whether it be a paid position or even a volunteer position. Research becomes very, very important as well. And then we really want to get an understanding of, the depth and what it is you've done in those particular activities. I know with, research, if kind of all you did was maybe, served as, like a clerk, that's a little bit different than actually being in a lab helping with research. And then there are other characteristics that we're looking at, right, as someone is going through their journey as a pre-med student that we think can really help them as they transition from an undergrad or even a graduate student into becoming a medical student. Do you want to talk about that, Dr. Bolaski?
Sure. I think about the extracurricular activities, I think about research. They give you some skills. They allow you to see patient-physician interactions, patient-nurse interactions, as well as researcher, contributions. It gives you that. It teaches you communication skills, and teaches you how to work with others, flexibility. One of the things I like to say during my interviews is, I ask the question, are you a good follower? Why is that important? Because good followers can become good leaders. So you need to learn to follow so that you can learn to lead. So these are all experiences extracurriculars address. And research is a very important component in medicine. Why? Because we wouldn't be anywhere without research in terms of drugs, in terms of procedures. It's such a fertile ground to create thoughtful, articulate, engaging physicians. And that's the theme. So while research is important, what experiences do you have in terms of understanding literature reviews, in terms of being able to think critically? And that's what research does, and that's what clinical activity does. It teaches you those skills that are very important in the field of healthcare.
Yeah, I want to dive in a little bit more because it is a holistic review. Sometimes there are activities that our students are engaged in that aren't necessarily something that's, let's say, on a pre-med track, but there's things such as like participation in athletics that could transfer to someone doing well in medical school. There's also, we run into candidates that come through that, maybe they're, having to help pay their way through school, and they've taken up an additional part-time job while going through a very challenging academic program and also preparing for the MCAT and finding time to do shadowing. That's taken into consideration, right? Like, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
You bring up a very, very good point. During the interview, I asked applicants if they worked while they were, pursuing their degree, and I think that's a positive thing. You have to work either to support yourself or support your family. That tells me that this individual not only thinks about themselves, but they think about others. And family is important. So work and other things, individuals that are involved in sports, routines, teamwork. You have to get up early in the morning to be at practice, especially one of my colleagues, his friend, his daughter was a rower. She'd have to be up at 4 a.m. to row, and then to make sure everything was put back. And then at the when she finished with that, she needed to be prepared to go to classes. So you look for balance. You look for an individual's ability to manage not only academics, but their personal life and their work-related life too. Not everybody is able just to go to school and not work. Though in medicine you can't work, but as an undergrad and grad you can do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because the question does come up, and there's just obviously no way possible to have a part-time job while you're going through your MD. But I think it definitely does show a lot about someone's character and time management. And the way I think about it is, someone had this previous course load to get to undergraduate, and obviously most people that are applying to medical school did well. Otherwise, they wouldn't be applying to medical school. But now you're just going to have so much more content coming your way. And, can you properly manage your time and having, certain responsibilities, be it with, a job or some type of leadership position, or maybe, you're on a competitive team, in college athletics, whatever it might be, that doesn't necessarily, it's not really like a pre-med track, but it shows that, if we throw this individual just more on their plate than what they had previously academically, more than likely they do have, the time management skills to deal with that and adapt. And I know, yourself and several other members we have in our leadership have, seen this previously. And I do think it also kind of speaks to understanding where our students are coming from. Not everyone goes to college with a silver spoon in their mouth. Some of our applicants had to, scratch and claw their way to make sure they could pay for tuition and cover basic living expenses. And all that is taken into consideration. And, I think what we've seen from some of our students who've come through our program is that, that could be transferred into success in medical school.
Right. One of the things that we look at too is, traditionally, we've looked in the past that individuals go through all 4 years of undergrad. And a lot of times that doesn't take place anymore, and it's more extended, either because of, personal issues, work, other things came up. What's important, again, is to be able to explain that. Not explaining it would be more a negative than explaining it. So there's a trend that's going on in undergraduate education that it's taking a little bit longer to complete a degree, and it's not in the traditional sense. Who knows what traditional is, at this point in time? Things are changing so dramatically. But the point that I'm trying to make is it's important to be able to explain and to articulate and to identify so that there's a strong base of communication during that interview process.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to our next slide. I know you're almost like, chopping at the bits to get to this one. In all the applications that you've reviewed, we're going to, hopefully not take up too much more time, because I would like to limit how long this webinar goes on. We could probably go on for an hour about this particular topic. But there are, and it does kind of pain me to see like people get to this point and just, have some like really common, pitfall mistakes where it's like, Jesus, this person could have really, done much better, whether it be, lack of really reflection in their essay, or not, properly putting in the time for that, not properly researching the school.
Yeah.
That they're in.
That's a big one. I'll ask a question in the interviews. So can you please describe to me what you feel some of the strengths are of our curriculum? I didn't look at it, or I looked cursory online. You need to do an in-depth study so that you understand that curriculum is going to match your needs. But Mason, I've got to interrupt about this. The lack of reflection in the essay. Please spell check your essay and grammar check. That's a way to upset. And I know it may seem small, but it's not small to committees. They want not perfection, but they want as close to it as you can get.
Yeah, I think, again, kind of getting back to what we were reflecting on earlier, it shouldn't take someone months and months to produce a personal statement. That being said, anyone who's completing a bachelor's degree should be able to write a personal statement about themselves and have it at, a professional level where there's been some, obviously spell check, grammatical errors. You've proofread it with someone else.
Yes.
Even if English is not your first language, there really is no excuse for not properly preparing what you're presenting, and showing that you've at least read it through or had others look at it. That's just, it really just kind of shows that someone is not really taking the process serious. And again, this is a competitive pool of medical school candidates. So we do hate to see that, where, it's like, oh, okay, this person just did not put in the time that others like clearly have. So, and secondly, like not doing your research on the school. I mean, you know, whether you're interviewing for medical school or eventually a job somewhere, in today's day and age with everything that's available online, with the website, you should really, thoroughly research that particular institution and really do your homework prior to the interview, and not just, kind of haphazardly, show up, because you are competing against many other prospective medical students, right? So, you do want to show that you've done your homework and you're, ready to, address the interview as best as possible.
Uh,
Go
what's
ahead,
what's
Dr.
what's
Bolaski.
important, for your interview too, is to show up early, not only to have knowledge of the program, but be prepared for questions about the program, and your attire. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead if there's any slides, but professional attire is very important during interviews. Now, what is professional attire? Uh, Ask some physicians that are in the hospital and let him or her give you an idea.
Yeah, it is really like disappointing when you get a candidate that you see like, oh, okay, they seem to like really work really hard previously, maybe did outstanding in their undergrad, good MCAT, bunch of shadowing experience, bunch of clinical experience, and then, just really like underperform in the interview process. And,
Right.
these are things that could be done, I think, that are significantly easier than spending 6 months retaking an MCAT. Like that's really difficult to do and to have a significant improvement in your scores. Or maybe having to take a post-bac program to improve your overall GPA. But small things, like showing up on time for your interview, showing that you've done, kind of your homework on the school that you're applying to, making sure you have good lighting, making sure you're dressed professionally. It really shows that you care. And, again, these are, in my opinion, things that are much easier to do than trying to go back and take an MCAT to improve the strength of your overall application. So details do matter. So I appreciate you. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to weigh into on that.
Well, sometimes I try to think about, well, what are some of the most humorous interactions that I've had, and some individuals say, well, I'm really looking forward to coming to your program in the Dominican Republic, and the reason is we're not the Dominican Republic, we're the Commonwealth of Dominica. We're two separate islands. We're English speaking here, and the Dominican Republic is Spanish. Why is that important? Well, it may share with the committee and the interviewers that you really didn't fully understand the school, or didn't do that knowledge, acquisition that would have been helpful. So is that a deal breaker? No, it's not. It really isn't. But it's an important thing, to pay attention to the details.
Yeah, and I want to also point out that the way that our admissions process works, the bulk of scholarships that go out to students are awarded by our admissions committee. So there's certain situations where someone might get accepted into our program, but because of a few small key mistakes, it ends up costing them thousands of dollars in scholarship money. So, we've seen it, time and time again where, maybe, with a few small, minor errors, they still get accepted into our program, but they might have gotten a significantly higher scholarship, which obviously, this could be, tens of thousands of dollars that they're making in mistakes. So, I appreciate you sharing that, Dr. Bolaski. We're going to try and move on. I did try and keep this thing to an hour, but as you know, we could probably extend this on for hours and hours, just, given our experience. So for those of you who are considering applying, I did mention that we are going to be starting our next semester. Actually, classes will start July 21st. We do have a few seats still available. We've not completely filled it up completely. So that's an option for folks if they're interested in starting that soon. We're also taking applications for spring and fall of 2026. For those that do apply for those semesters, your application will be put on hold until we start this semester. So I do want to point out, we do not charge an application fee. All applicants that go through the admissions process are reviewed automatically for scholarships that we already have. If you already have AMCAS or COMAS application, you could really use that if you already have it, because it does have your grades on there already. In addition to that, we usually want a resume. There might be some other documents that we need as well, but we have made our application pretty straightforward. Most people can get their application, whether it's our traditional application or one where you're uploading an AMCAS or a COMAS application. Usually just takes a few minutes to apply. As Dr. Bolaski pointed out, do make sure you have everything in order when applying. Take your time to really read through everything. And you can check our website. It does have all the requirements. We do require that you have completed a bachelor's degree. We do require that you take the MCAT, and then there are certain prerequisite courses that you'll need to have completed. That really, across the board at almost any medical school that you're looking at going to. So we've worked really diligently with our admissions committee on trying to make it a smooth process once people do apply. I know, my team works really diligently on reviewing applications. Because it is a holistic review, we try and give as many people an opportunity to interview with us. Doesn't always mean you're going to get accepted, but I think, kind of as we've laid out in this presentation, it is a holistic review. There are small things that can be done to really help strengthen your application. And sometimes it takes people multiple admission cycles to get accepted. If you really are passionate about doing this, don't let getting rejected to medical school for your first cycle discourage you. There are plenty of physicians who are now practicing that might have had to apply 2 or 3 times until they get accepted. But we do, after the interview, we do try and get someone an admissions decision. Most people are able to get an admissions decision within a week. There are time periods where it does take longer. But we really have done a thorough job of, making sure we are reviewing applications. And, again, I think everyone who's on here can get a sense that every application is really gone through with a fine-tooth comb. So it is labor intensive, and we do our best to try and get people an admissions decision. And for those of you that do go through the process and get accepted, we really have a quick onboarding process as well. So you don't know if you'll get accepted until you do go through the process of applying. And, if you are not accepted, it doesn't always mean no forever. You could be in a situation where maybe you need to go back and strengthen your application. Maybe you need to get some additional clinical experience. Maybe, you need to go and look at doing a post-bac program. We also do have a preparatory program, which is an entirely separate webinar, which I think is really a good option for people who are passionate about becoming a physician. But, as an admissions committee, we'll look at them and say, well, this person most likely would struggle in their first semester in medical school. So the idea is to give people the proper foundations, because we don't want to bring someone into our program only to have them just totally get washed out in their first semester. That's not going to really benefit anyone. And I do see we have some folks who have asked questions. So I will go through some of these questions and we'll try and answer them as best we can.
Okay.
So Karen wants to know how far back should someone go on their resume or CV, especially for some of our non-traditional students who, might have been in the workforce for quite some time. Dr. Bolaski, what do you think is a appropriate timeline for looking at how far back someone might have been working?
I'd go as far back as high school. And I think that that's important because I want to see a timeline and if there are any breaks. So you'd look at that, and I would like to see the months and the years as well. And some places you might even want to put in the number of hours if you're doing shadowing activity. Please, shadowing activity, research activity, all of this should go in your resume. If you've been out of school for a while, you know, you can make a statement with that, but you should go back at least, whenever your whenever your undergraduate degree was or graduate degree, I'd go probably from that time, undergraduate experiences too.
And
Somebody
kind of-
asked a question earlier, if I could interrupt, about graduate degrees. And yes, we have a number of applicants with graduate degrees, PhDs, and terminal degrees in other fields. So, but if you had a challenging undergraduate experience, the committee or committees would look mostly at a medical science background for a master's degree as opposed to an MPH or an MBA. While they're very important degrees to have in the professional field, if you're looking to get into medicine and your grades aren't that strong in the sciences, then I would pursue a medical master's.
Yeah, there's also some post-bac programs that are out there, but I think for someone who has a weaker, undergraduate record, the big question I think that the admissions committee is going to have is how strong of a foundation does this person have in science? So some of these MPH programs and MBA programs, although it's great that someone went and got a graduate degree, does it address the question of does this person have the proper background in science to do well in medical school? So great question, and obviously
thank you for clarifying that. That's very important.
All right, Fatima has a question. Is it necessary to have research experience, and how much does it affect the application?
Depends on which member of the admissions committee that you speak to. Some put more emphasis on research than others, but it's not a deal breaker. I would encourage individuals, if they don't have any lab research experience, maybe within their course work, some literature reviews, just to give you where you can have some degree of understanding of why research is a relevant part of health education. But no, it's important. In some programs, it's very necessary. Other programs, it's not that necessary. I mean, we've had people on that were admitted to our program that didn't have any research experience. I'll be very clear about that. But they had, again, other strengths in other areas which offset that.
And I think it also, there's many roads to get to being a successful medical student, right? So, it does come down to the individual opportunities that were there. I would hope that, as someone's going through, whatever research opportunities there are, particularly as an undergrad or maybe, as a graduate student, these are experiences that they're really passionate about and not just trying to check a box so that they could get into medical school. And that really comes out in the interview as we're evaluating candidates. So, it also gets to clinical experience, right? Because sometimes students will ask me, well, how many hours should I have in a clinical experience? And it's not so much about checking a box like, hey, you have X amount of hours in a clinical experience. It should be more, you've had this experience of actually being in a clinical setting where you're dealing with sick people. You understand what it is. You understand the fact that our healthcare system is broken in some areas. But at the same time, you understand how important that role is. And you have a sense of duty of understanding that, hey, this is what you're going to be doing going forward with your career. So, if you don't want to work with sick people, there's nothing wrong with finding another route, but this is not the one for you. I think, it really depends on the individual and what opportunities there are. We do get some students that come through that are really interested in research, and some that have just kind
Yeah.
of looked into it. So it's really not a one size fits all. But thanks for asking the question, Fatima.
Yes. Very good question. Thank you.
And let's see if we have any more questions. If anyone wants to drop, let's see. Fatima also asked if a third year student's GPA is not as strong. They still have the last year. What would you recommend they do? Take an extra year, do a master's? That's a tough one. I'll let
Boy,
you.
that really is a tough one. I wish I had a clear-cut answer. I don't know if you do, Mason, but my thought is, work as diligently as you can in your final year. See what your performance is. Use your resources on campus, and then you might want to think of a post-bac, which would be very strong. There's some great post-bacs that are online at different universities and medical schools, and then there's a master's too that you could do. These are all individual choices. What fits into your lifestyle, your expectations, your finances. I wish there was one clear answer that we could provide.
Yeah, I think it really depends, right, on what's going on in also why did this individual kind of have a drop
Yeah.
their third year? Is this a situation where maybe someone, when they got to upper level science classes, weren't properly prepared, and now they're struggling? Is there something that was going on? There's all sorts of reasons. So, and on the opposite side of the coin, there's all sorts of ways to fix it and to totally not panic. I'm a big fan of our preparatory program. Actually, I have someone that kind of was in a similar situation where they had a really strong first 2 years, and there was a drop off. Ended up in our prep program, and did well. But there are other options with post-bac programs, and it really depends. And so it's kind of like you really have to look at everything. But you should be looking at options. I think you brought up a really good point, Dr. Bolaski. There are a number of really good medical master programs that are out there, post-bac programs, but also we are mindful of the fact that those programs do cost money, and so what does that look like? I was talking with someone earlier today who wants to go to medical school. She actually didn't complete organic chemistry, which was quite shocking, considering she'd already taken the MCAT, and could have to do with her overall scores. But kind of my response to her was, find any way to take organic chemistry. If your only option is to take it online, then that's your only option. But obviously, we are going to evaluate the programs that people go into. So we'll go ahead and look to move on to some of the next questions that we have. Okay, so Karen wants to know, what are a couple of examples for medical school interview prep? John, do you want to try and address that one?
Well, I would practice, and practice, especially interviewing. I think it's important to find a group of students, in this, if you're in school right now, that are applying to medical school, and you review. There's so much information out there on the internet that you can get about, questions that you should practice on. I think it's very important to stay up to date, because you're going to get questions about, well, we'd like you to talk about a new medical innovation. What's the most recent book that you've read? Can you share a little bit about your thoughts about what unconscious bias means, and if you ever run into a situation of that nature? How do you work with individuals that may not be, pulling their weight, whether you're, working on a project or things like that? What we're talking about is building language skills and communication skills, so that you feel stronger in ability, and having the ability to really assert yourself in a very important way. So interview preparation can vary from individual to individual. What are your strengths? I would do a self-inventory. What do you feel your strengths are? What do you feel areas that you're challenged in? And then really to address those.
Great. I appreciate it. And we're going to take one more question, and then we'll move on. Okay, so Fatima wants to know, what is the best advice you've received or want to give that would help students?
Learn good listening skills. I think it says it all right there. Because if you don't listen and just talk about yourself, you're going to be challenged.
Well, I appreciate it, Dr. Bolaski. Thank you for logging in and joining us. We really appreciate your wisdom. We went a little bit over than as far as how long we were expecting to be on this. But if you still have additional questions, feel free to connect with one of our admissions advisors. We are available for one-on-one meetings, so we can go, really into depth, about, where someone is, and what some of the next steps might be for them. So that is available for our anyone who is a prospective applicant.
And I'd just like to thank you all for being here tonight, and taking the time to listen to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you are ready to apply, we are prioritizing applications for July 2025. So those are still open. If you're ready to apply for 2026, we'll take those applications as well. Again, there's no application fee. I do, encourage everybody, if this is something that you're passionate about, and this is a profession you want to go into, you do have to have the courage to kind of make the leap and go through the application process. If you end up getting rejected, I always tell students, just getting to the point that you're ready to apply for medical school is a big accomplishment in and of itself. Don't let the process discourage you. There are many great physicians who had to go through 2 or 3 admission cycles until finally getting into medical school. So if it is something that you really feel that you're destined to do and you want to continue to pursue it, I encourage you to go ahead and apply. And if you don't get in immediately, there are other options. It doesn't always mean no for forever. So thank you very much for logging in. This will be also recorded on YouTube as well. I know some people wanted to know, can we get a copy of the slides? Thank you very much to Teresa, who put our slides together. And we look forward to hearing from anyone who's interested in applying with us. So have a great evening.
Thank you again. Take care.